Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Table Turners, and we are the JC, or Jubilee Collective. I'm Linda, and I have two other hosts with me. You want to introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon, I'm Rodney from Indiana. That's where I work now.
Hi, everybody. I'm Teresita, and I am coming to you from Florida.
Awesome. So today's show is just to address what has been going on lately with these mass shootings and everything that we've been seeing that is going on with the immigrant community that is in this country, currently in this country, and how we are dealing with it, with you two being pastors, with me being a theologian and a teacher of Black and Latino students. So we want to open up with an article that we thought was important that addressed some of the issues that we want to discuss today. And Rodney is going to take it from there.
Yes, good afternoon. So Linda sent us an article earlier this week to help us prepare for today's show. And it's an article entitled, "Recent Shootings Spur Pastors to Call Out White Supremacy." For many evangelicals, it's time to name the evil beneath the violence. And this was an August 5th article by Kate Schett. And I want to jump down to the third paragraph to start off our conversation. I want to jump down to the third paragraph of this article that reads as thus. As president of SWBTS, I want to be clear that we condemn in the strongest possible form any and all ideologies of racial, ethnic superiority, inferiority that fuel the kind of hate evidently motivating the El Paso shooter to commit such a horrific act of violence in our state. Adam Greenway, president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, he tweeted that. So listen to what it says again. He says, Adam Greenway, president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, I want to be clear that we condemn in the strongest possible form any and all ideologies of racial / ethnic superiority / inferiority that fuel the kind of hate evidently motivating the El Paso shooter to commit such a horrific act of violence in our state. Hear this again. I want to be clear that we condemn the strongest possible form any and all ideologies, racial, ethnic, superiority, inferiority that fuel the kind of hate evidently motivating the El Paso shooting to commit such a horrific act of violence in our state. My problem, when I read that, I said, it sounds to me, and maybe this is not what the person means, but it sounds to me that racial and ethnic superiority and / inferiority is okay as long as it doesn't fuel hate.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's what I read when I hear it. Because he said he condemns it as long as it fuels the kind of hate evidently motivating the shooter of El Paso. So if it don't fuel hate, is it okay?
Well, it's not worth condemning.
It's not worth condemning.
It's not worth
my
condemning.
issue.
But I don't read it that way.
You don't read it that way, huh? I immediately read it that way.
Teresita, do you?
I was I had other problems with it.
Okay.
I didn't pick that up first, but I did pick up on what do you call it? Beating around the bush kind of thing. Just for the fact that it's just handpicking El Paso because it was succinctly an area where
they are.
Where exactly where people from Hispanic people are. But what are the other ones, right? What about all the other shootings? They were all, in my opinion, and what I believe, fueled by hate and racism. But it's interesting. It's interesting what you bring to the table, Ronnie.
Now, I could be wrong. I'm not saying he meant it, but that immediately jumped out to me.
I guess.
Because it's the kind, right? The kind of hate that fuels.
Right.
And so I Googled, I ticked on his Twitter. Of course, this is a white man speaking or writing.
Right.
He might not be aware of his own,
biases, right?
Right.
Yeah.
White
exactly.
supremacyism.
Yeah.
So he's speaking from that place of, but so I condemning is a strong word, and I don't even think that tweeting about it is enough. You know.
Right. Of course not.
Right.
Because even with the title of the article, that these evangelical pastors or leaders are coming out condemning white supremacy, to call it out. I just don't know. I just haven't seen that other than people posting on tweeting or on Facebook. I haven't seen how that condemnation translates to Sunday morning, how condemnation translates into especially a higher education institution. How does it translate where we're teaching, where we're working during the week? What does it mean really to condemn white supremacy? What does it look like to condemn white supremacy in our work?
I see both of your points, but reading this, I honestly don't feel that, it doesn't feel to me as if the president, Adam Greenway, was saying to only condemn it only in this case. I think he's using this situation as part of what we have, as part of the larger picture. So it's gotten to the point where they've been quiet for too long, and we can't do this anymore. This is indicative of a larger problem, and it's about time that we stand up and say something. And that's the way I read it, especially with the title and subtitle of the article, and then reading this quote. That's the way it feels to me when I read what Adam Greenway says. Because they do, and condemning it, even if it's just in writing or on Facebook or on Twitter, that's the first step. But you can't stop at the first step. You have to go further. But so many people in this country are completely unwilling to even make that first step.
Right.
So go ahead.
And I'm appreciating the diversity in this conversation and how we're reading it, how we're reading the article, because as people of color, we're not monolithic, right?
Right.
So the diversity and how we all see something different in this, and how the president of SW BTS, what he's saying here. So that's good. But I also want to say this. Condemning and the calling out piece and remaining silent about this. One thing I'm tired of is, and I'm glad it's in here, is what Greg Laurie and Jack Graham said. So it's down there.
It's
like around the 9th paragraph,
okay.
where it says, on Sunday, preachers Greg Laurie and Jack Graham attributed the surge in shootings to an escalating spiritual battle of the devil, while others specified that such evil is rooted in racism. So you can see, I just knew that's what you expect from those two pastors, right? To not want to call it out like what Linda is saying, right?
Right.
To have the privilege, listen now, to have the male privilege to not call this out as what it is, which is white supremacist, extremist terror, domestic terror.
Right.
That, and one thing I'm gonna push back on what I hear a lot of people say, oh, this is not the America I know. Well, no, this is too familiar to America that I do know. And if you pick up some books, you will see that this is not nothing new to this country.
Right. Absolutely.
And then I'm gonna share this piece, and then I'll let you go, Teresita. I was talking with another group of campus pastors, actually. I'm part of the National Campus Ministry Association and NCMA. And we was talking the other day, and I asked them, because we were just checking in with one another, and this is still heavy on my heart, you know what I mean? And so I asked them, and they're all white, male and female, and I asked them, what are you all doing to prepare for to deal with this white supremacist, extremist, domestic terror in this country? And I said, the profile of individuals who do this domestic terror are white, male, college age, and Christian.
Yes.
And to them, that's who we're gonna be dealing with for at least another school year.
Right.
What are you preparing to do to deal with that issue when the profile is white, male, college age, and Christian?
So I'm curious, what was their answer?
And then I said to them, or are you exercising your privilege to do nothing?
Right.
Because I don't have that privilege to do nothing about it. Right. I do not have that privilege to stay silent, which would mean I would be complicit in that behavior, right?
Right.
And the question was very provoking, and they really didn't have an answer, but now it's on their mind.
Good.
You know what I'm saying? Because, I didn't really expect them to be preparing for it. Some of, excuse me, one or two of them said some things that they have been doing in the past to help do racial conciliation work. And I don't use the word, when I talk about racist, and we all know it's a social construct, it's not even real, but for lack of a better term, when I talk about racist and race relationships, I refuse to use the word reconciliation, because you don't reconcile what never was, right? You can only do conciliation work. You can try to heal hostility and the anger amongst the two races, or the hostility or the anger that white folks have for people of color. Because it's not that we have their hostility against them, it's how they treat us, right? Because whenever it seems like that people of color is thriving or prospering in this land, they feel threatened. And so we have to be dealt with or dismissed by any means necessary.
Right.
So, there wasn't a lot of feedback, except for some things that some mentioned they were doing they had done in the past. But now I got them thinking. and I will be challenging them and holding them accountable every time we meet.
I appreciate so much, Ronnie, that case study, so to speak, in real practice of what does it look like to hold people accountable.
Accountable, absolutely.
Of their own, of what it means, white privilege. A lot of white people are still under the umbrella that white privilege is this ghost that's been constructed. Of course it has been, but it's real. And so I appreciate you bringing that case study, because you pointed out right there, are you going to hide under your privilege of not having to do anything about it because it's not affecting you right now?
Correct.
But it is affecting your community. And
absolutely.
I want to go back to that comment you made about people saying, well, this is not the America we know, and there's so many of us who have known this America. And maybe they are right. Maybe they have never known it because it has not affected them, and they have been able to hide under the umbrella of their privilege.
Exactly.
And right now we're in a threshold where that is no longer a luxury.
Correct.
Or to enjoy or entertain. And so I so appreciate you for being prophetic in that space, because you're right. Even when you didn't expect them to be preparing for it, now you planted this seed that hey, maybe I can do something about it, and I will do something about it in my context. So I thought that was powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Teresita.
No. Go ahead. I'm good. I just appreciate so much when there is a life example, so people can hold on to it. Inaction is privilege, and if you can't afford to not do anything, then that in and of itself, right there, it's an X-ray of your privilege, and that's important. I think that touches all of us.
Yeah, and I have a big issue with things that are done in this country, especially when it's done to an oppressed group, and people just want to dismiss it by saying, oh, it's the spiritual battle, it's the work of the devil. It's no, the devil, if you want to call it the devil, the evil is the people that are doing these acts. When are we going to call it out for what it is and stop acting like, there's this ethereal being that controls people and puts these evil spirits? No, you're the evil one. Okay, so stop. And the evil is racism in this case. And the evil may be the person on an individual basis, but the evil it's not rooted in racism. The evil is racism. So they need to be careful about the way they worded that last sentence, because that's what this country was founded on. It was founded on racism and white supremacy from the time that they captured Africans and brought them here on boats. So from the time that they committed genocide on the Native Americans that were already here. Everything that this country was founded on is racism.
And that's the work of the devil, white supremacy. How about that, Jack Graham? How about white supremacy as the work of the devil?
Exactly.
So it's easy to deflect responsibility and to put blame on someone who can't defend themselves. So we do it or we do it to the devil, but either one is pick your choice. Have your pick.
Correct.
So the devil, right? That's the narrative of our Christian community. This is the work of the devil, the lone wolf.
Right.
Mentally ill. So usually the lone wolf ends up shooting. The police shoots him and takes him out or puts him in a cell. But the idea, I think one of the positive things about this paragraph that you highlighted, Ronnie, is the idea that we're no longer now excused of putting all the blame on one figure, whether it be the devil or the lone wolf or the one person who's mentally ill that fell through the cracks and we didn't catch him on time. Now we're forced to see this is a systemic corporate evil, right? That we all participate in one way or another. This is our responsibility, whether we perpetuate it or whether we do something to push back or to make it different, or if we choose to not, just remain silent and idle.
Right.
There's
Right.
positive
Right.
to look at that is the naming of something that's systemic and that is not isolated and it's not just one person. So yeah, I think it's you hit on it, Linda, where you say, you know, blaming the devil is a cop out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
just a cop out. Very easy to say, very easy response. The poor guy is being blamed with enough things. How about we take some responsibility of how we
Right.
right?
Right.
We help the devil do his work. We are the ones who make it happen.
Right.
Correct. And on the flip side, we are the ones that can be doing the justice that God calls us to do.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. We're
Exactly.
supposed to be the kingdom builders. And what does that look like? What does it look
Right.
like where we are, where the kingdom, of course, is a, you know, a place where there is no complex of superiority, of inferiority, where we're building equality, where we're working for justice. And it's always while we're here, right? We're working towards it. So what does it look like for people of faith to grasp that vision and say, listen, this white supremacy is incompatible with Christian living.
Right.
It's incompatible with what we're expected to be as a people of God.
Right.
Right.
And I'm sorry, Rodney.
Go ahead, Linda. I can hold.
But I was going to say, and what are we going to do more than just giving our thoughts and prayers? Because I'm tired of that too. I get so tired of Christians thinking that it is okay to only pray. Of course, pray. Please don't anybody get it twisted.
Right.
I pray I can talk to Rodney and pray at the same time. I pray constantly.
Yeah.
So I am saying, yes, absolutely. Right. Please pray, but then get up and do something, because we know that it very clearly says in the Bible, faith without works is dead.
It's dead.
So what are you going to do to put your faith in action?
Right.
And people, many Christians, think that just saying, oh, I give my thoughts and prayers, and even when you say that, are you really praying about it, or are you just saying it because it sounds good, because that's what you're supposed to say?
Your pieces are guilt.
Right.
What are you actually doing? What are you actually praying about? That's the other thing, because you could be praying, but then what are you praying about? What are you praying for?
Right. Right. And I echo that, Linda. You know, one thing I love about corporate prayer is that you get to hear the hearts of the people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped going to a particular prayer meeting, if you would, out here in Indiana, because month after month, I would go there and predominantly white evangelicals, and you know, it could be a week or a day after a white supremacist domestic terrorist attack, and go there and they pray, and not one of them will pray about that issue.
Wow.
I don't need to be here.
Wow.
You know, because you know why though? They have the privilege.
Right.
Not because no white supremacist is going to go shoot up their church, you know, or go shoot up the area where they're maybe sitting at, right? They ain't coming at them. And so, yeah, there's something else I wanted to say that is escaping me at this moment. So, but it'll come back. Thank God we can get to edit this show.
Yeah, we can.
You hope.
Oh man.
Oh.
Yeah.
I got it. It just came back to me. So I wanted to say this too, because when I named the profile of this type people, it brought out another question. And listening to Teresita and Linda helped me with this too. It brings out the question, what does it mean to be Christian? You know, because there's this Christian identity movement, which these people are ascribed to, if you would. You know, there's two requirements, and I heard this from the horse's mouth. They're on some show, right? There's two requirements to be a member of the KKK: white and Christian.
Right.
Right. And as one of the found students said to me when I said that, he said, "Wow, even Jesus can't join that movement."
Right.
Because he was neither one, was he?
Neither
right?
one, exactly.
Neither. You know. So what does it mean to be Christian? If domestic terror in this country are done by radical Christians, if you would, you know, and yet because they're white and male, they get to keep their lives and do such evil, because you know darn well if this person was a Muslim, they'd be bombing somewhere right about now. You know what I'm saying? So you know, and that's why, you know, I thank God for our theological education, and in addition to meeting good friends like you two, and the crew we had at Drew, you know, I was so thankful and blessed to be introduced to Howard Thurman's spirituality, if you would, you know, because Thurman would never identify as a Christian, but what he believed in, religion of Jesus. And the religion of Jesus is not always synonymous with Christianity.
Yep.
So the question is, what, you know, maybe that's a topic for the podcast. What does it really mean to be a Christian, and who's a Christian? You know, when I was in and Dr. Evans helped me with this in Church History 2, I believe it was, and he was like, you know, the question is not really who's a Christian. The question really is, what kind of Christian are you?
Right.
You know, because I can care less when people tell me they're Christian. What
does it mean?
Yeah, yes. What does that even mean today? I don't care less what that you're a Christian. Okay, and you know what I mean?
Right.
So the best lab for that for me was when I was trying to find a husband, and I went on a Christian dating site.
That's
what
good luck.
You want to be involved with anybody who says anybody who claims to be a Christian,
right?
Because you know, so there's cultures within cultures of Christianity, and all of that has to be pulled out. And I think that we do a disservice when we don't name that. When we don't name that, you know, I'm not that type of Christian. There's a different type of Christianity. I think important as in my own theological understanding of the type of Christianity that brews nationalism and white supremacy.
Right.
For me, what I hear and what I have been gleaning out, Jesus doesn't play a whole lot of game in that faith. It's mostly the Bible, right? They worship the Bible. And and there's nothing wrong with that. I love my Bible. I study it. Holy Spirit speaks to my life through the written word, the sacred text. But there's a whole lot of nationalism, ideologies and dogma in the Bible.
Absolutely.
And people translate that into what it means to be white and what it means to be a nation that needs to defend themselves from other nations.
Right.
And so there's a lot of weapons and dogma in scripture that if it's not well, preached on or studied or interpreted, fuels the fears that people already have in their hearts.
Right.
And so I think this conversation about the shootings, it's also a conversation about fear. And it for me, it's in the context of that word terrorism. So what does it look like, right? This is no longer an issue of isolated people working on their own. It's a nation of people that have been raised with the dogma that produces the kind of fear that provokes this type of behavior. And in a time and place where our nation is becoming more diverse than ever, is igniting this fear that kind of behavior for mass shootings and for eliminating people. We need to keep naming it terrorism because it also influences the way we Black and brown people live out in the world.
Right. Absolutely.
So what does it look like for us to worship publicly? What does it look like for us to go out shopping at a Walmart? What does it look like for us
Right.
to a concert? What does it look like for us to take our children to the park?
Right.
These are, it has real implications and until we start naming it what it is, not a lot of solutions are going to come out.
Right.
I will say this, Linda, I think your call for action is important, but we also need to talk about what does it look like to act. Well, me personally, I'm going to be praying and I'll be thinking, I'll be sending thoughts and prayers, but I will be sending those thoughts and prayers to the list of my local representatives, and they're going to be hearing from me on a consistent basis.
Yes.
And that's going to be one of the things that I'm going to do as a spiritual practice. I'm going to be writing to people, whoever I have an address for. I will be calling in, and more of the political leaders need to hear from these type of Christians like us, right?
Right.
And I think that's part of a muscle we haven't exercised in a while.
And it's important for churches because a church that has a congregation, there's a group of people right there that can put their faith into action, that can actually take, someone in, as an individual may be powerless, may feel powerless, and that's completely understandable. So I'm not saying that, we can't feel fear, we can't feel powerless. We all do at some point, but at some point we have to get over that fear, and we have to look for ways in which we can do something. Find organizations within your community that are doing things that you can become a part of. Teresita, like you said, write to representatives. Just take some sort of action. And leaders, church leaders, have a responsibility to not sit by and allow, if you want to call this, the devil or whatever, like if the church is called to go into action when there's evil that is present, then if that evil is racism, then they are called to fight racism. So this is exactly what the church is supposed to be doing. And they need to see that as part of their identity as a church.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. Like, Rodney, going back to what you said, with Howard Thurman not calling himself a Christian, I've raised the question myself. Do I call myself a Christian, or do I call myself a follower of Christ?
Right.
Because those, to me, are two completely different things. Right. Being a Christian is caught up in dogma and ideology. Being a follower of Christ means following Christ as an example.
Right. And to that point, Linda, when you talk about being a Christian and a follower of Christ, again, I heard not too long ago that 80% of Americans claim Christianity.
Wow.
Okay.
80%.
Now, 80% claim Christianity, but I know doggone well 80% ain't following Jesus.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because if 80% of this country really truly followed Jesus, we wouldn't be this America really would be a United States of America.
Right.
Exactly. It wouldn't be on its way to being one day, maybe, or yet to be. Excuse me, or yet to be. But yeah, I mean, and that's why I go back. Linda and Teresita, I could care less if you claim Christianity, this westernized Christianity, which is seeped and birthed in white supremacy.
Right.
I could care less. In fact, if it wasn't for Christians, our people wouldn't have been enslaved people for 3 centuries. If it wasn't for Christians, there wouldn't have been another 100 years of Jim Crowism. If it wasn't for Christians, our people, the people of color, wouldn't be prisoners of war, prisoners of this so-called war on drugs.
Right.
If it wasn't for Christians. You know what I'm saying? But it ain't about being, I don't care about your Christianity. I don't care about you claiming Jesus. Are you following Jesus? Are you a disciple of Jesus?
Right.
Bottom line.
Exactly.
Yep. Exactly.
You know?
That is the discipleship is the key piece.
Yes.
And I think we disciple for good or we disciple for evil. But if you're a disciple of Christ, if you are a disciple of Christ, you have to be for goodness. You have to be for goodness sake in the sight of justice.
That's right.
And so those are the fruit, right? Scripture says you will know them by the fruit.
Right.
Right.
And so what I see in this type of Christianity that we have brewed, that has been rooted in our history, in our heritage, is this very evident, at least I see it that way, this intersection between religiosity or piety or Christianity and violence. And so for me, another piece that religious leaders, Christian leaders, pastors, whatever you are, if you're discipling people, please be aware of the violent language you use.
Right.
Yes.
Thing about, I have the victory, I'm in the battle and the enemy can overcome. I mean, all these, we have inherited this language that has rich, I know it's rich, but also how are your young people and the people that we're discipling, you're calling them to act out on their Christianity. Well, were you using this language of violence? Guess what?
Right.
It's no surprise this is where we are, because we have been so sloppy with our language, sloppy, perpetuating the words that we have inherited. And we thought that people were not listening, and we thought that people would not act upon them. And guess what? People are acting upon them.
Right.
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 Trying to overcome an enemy, and they're feel that they're doing this as a crusade for God,
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. Now I want to switch gears really quickly before we start to wrap this up, because we were talking earlier before we started recording about whether or not Trump is to blame for this. And we had a good conversation about that I want to capture in this video. So my thoughts are that Trump is definitely bears some blame, a huge deal of blame for this, because it is the language that he uses, just like Teresita said, the language of violence that is used in scripture, but also he uses language that is violent and is racist and is xenophobic and is sexist and is, we can go on. So he is like the manifestation of so many isms that exist. And because he uses this type of language constantly, it makes his supporters feel empowered to go out and act on that language that he uses.
Right.
So his supporters have a champion, right? Now they have a champion. And,
exactly.
And
exactly.
I guess they feel that, oh, okay, so we can now speak up, because the piece, right? Being politically correct. It's a thing of weak people, but because we're strong, we're gonna say out loud what we really think, and then we're gonna act upon it to show how strong we are. And I think that's the rhetoric that he uses, right?
So and hear this quote, and back to the article, right? The El Paso tragedy marks the second U.S. attack this year involving a young white man who named the New Zealand mosque gunman as inspiration, as did the California synagogue shooting suspect back in April. According to reports, the 21-year-old accused of opening fire at Walmart wrote, "This attack is in a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas."
Wow.
Now, Hispanic invasion, deplorable, shithole countries,
Right.
all the immigrants, well, let's go back. We want our country back, make America great again.
Right.
That kind of language fuels
It's war language
person to do what he's doing. So, whether he's responsible or not, his language certainly contributes
Right.
to these people's actions, and it's coming from the highest office in the world.
It's coming from the what is it? The commander-in-chief, right?
Right.
Who is the commander-in-chief if not the head of the armed forces? This is the language of war, and what is perpetuating, putting us at a brink of civil war. And I might be exaggerating, and I might be paranoid, but at the same time, I don't put it past the energy that we're seeing. Right? The energy that we're seeing is people who are being afraid of losing their Second Amendment, their right to bear arms. We see a culture of people who are hoarding arms. Ammunition, the same type of group of people who are afraid that they're being invaded and that their privileges and rights are being taken away from them. So there's a lot at stake here, especially coming from the president. And I'm going to push back because we were talking earlier about, blaming the devil and blaming the lone wolf and the mentally ill. Well, Trump could also be a scapegoat for us. And will it all go away once he's away from his presidency, whether it's in the next 4 years or in the next 8 years, whatever, after 8
That is a good point, Teresita, because
I think we need to hold ourselves to that standard of what will happen even if he wasn't part of the equation, and how are we going to deal with this mess even long after he's gone.
Right. Because look at what happened when Obama was in office. Obama, who didn't use any of that language, but because people were so angry that a Black man was president, a whole lot of racist actions started coming out at that time. And this was long before Trump was, even presented as a possibility for being president. So you're right, Teresita, because, what happens in 2020? Does racism, because remember, we were a post-racial society when Obama got into office. So, and we knew that was a lie then. Right. And it's very obvious. We're seeing all the actions of this post-racial society with, mass shootings that are steeped in racism. So do we become that magical post-racial society once Trump is out of office?
We have these conversations with my family at the family table, and of course, we come from different places in the spectrum, and I'm even gonna say this with fear because I don't want to put anything in anybody's mind. But I said this at the table. I said, so when Obama was president, it generated this anxiety, right, in white supremacists that propelled finding a champion, and they found their champion. And God forbid, I would say, God forbid Kamala wins. What would the president would look like for her, right? When this has been all energized, enabled, what would that look like? And that is a scary place. That's scary to me. But all that to say that there is a backlash that we're going to have to deal with for years and years to come. Years to come, even after Donald Trump is no longer Donald Trump.
And let me share this, because and I know this is not what you're saying, Teresita, but you hear this in the media a lot as soon as this happens, and it's a particular type of body politic that does domestic terror, right? Quickly they're crazy. You know, they wanna quickly put on the mentally ill or the lone wolf, and not deal with the evil beneath. All I'm hearing about is gun violence, right? And not really hearing much about the evil that's beneath the use of guns. You know, I get it. I get there's a gun issue, but you know, there's an evil within the hearts of humanity, seeped in white supremacy, that's causing the issue with guns. So I don't want to hear. I mean, yes, we want to talk about gun, but let's not forget about the evil.
Mm-hmm.
The root, right? The root of all.
That's
the root
right.
of all evils is evil.
You know, exactly. And
Right.
truth be told,
Exactly.
excuse me. And truth be told, our brothers and sisters who suffer from mental illness are more likely to be victims of violence, not to be perpetrators of violence.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
So no, let's not. Yeah, okay. You know, they are sick. They sick in their hearts. How about that?
That's different.
Right.
That's different. And you
Right.
know, in this whole debate, and that's not an illness.
Yeah, racism is not an illness.
It's
Right.
It's something you can be, you know, well, I guess if it's not an illness, you can be cured, but it's curable too. I mean, you can be harmed in your heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
And it's a choice. Let's just, you know, be real. It is a choice. People choose to be racist or choose not to be. Now, that's not to say that people, you know, aren't, it can always be something that, you know, someone's parents were racist, so they raised their child to be racist. So that ideology was embedded in their psyche.
So right.
You know, which happens. It's not to say that it doesn't, but something being embedded in your psyche is very different from something being a psychosis. So, you know, this whole thing about, you know, racism or being a mental illness, or, you know, this mass violence being caused by mental illness, we have to get away from that language.
Right. And you know, to add to that, Linda, oh God, I forgot my point again.
I'm sorry. Did I talk too much?
No. I had it. It'll come back. Yeah, go ahead.
It'll come back as fast as it did the last time.
But I just, when we look at the history of this country, that, you know, it began with genocide, and then chattel slavery, and you know, indentured servitude, and lynchings, and Japanese internment camps, and now we have, you know, these immigrant concentration camps. How can we, as a nation of people, honestly say that racism and white supremacy is not the problem? How can we honestly say that? How can we honestly say that these issues exist in a silo, so to speak? And, you know, they exist in a silo, and then there's this outside evil force that's kind of, you know, causing things to happen within the silo. No, it's not a silo. It's who we are as a nation. As a nation, this is a racist, white supremacist country. Period. And what are we going to do to break down those structures? Because it's systemic. It's and it's embedded in the identity of this country.
So my background is in public communications and mass media, and when I hear you say, how can they say it's not? Then my first question is, who is they? And my response to that would be whoever is in control of media, whoever is in control designing the country's narrative, right?
Right.
So I think that's why this work that we're doing is important, because we no longer have to wait for some head honcho at a station to put us on TV so that we could voice the voice of our people and the voice of our communities and the people of God who are working for justice. Now we can bypass all that BS, and that's why we need more people that look like us, voicing and speaking out and recording their thoughts and putting them out in the media, because whoever controls the media controls the minds of the people. And that's one of the things that
they definitely control the narrative. Right.
Controls the narrative. So so that's why it's so important, this work that we're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And back to your point, Linda, that you choose to be racist. I would say that, and I think you mentioned it also, because you connected to learned behavior. So I can choose to act out in racist ways. I've been taught that, right? And, I'll give you an example of one of the, I was in a meeting with a group of faith leaders, and this person, older person, gentleman, happened to be Catholic, and he shared this story about an incident that happened right on Purdue campus, where a group of white fraternity males jumped on a African-American woman and beat her up or did something stupid, right? And the church tried to deal with that, right? And asked the fraternity brothers, well, why would you do that? And one of the responses was, this is what I've been taught. And if I don't act, and if I don't act out this way, watch this. He says, if I don't act out this way, then I'm going against my family.
What?
Yes. He said, if I don't act out that way, I'm going against my own family. So he would rather be faithful to his family values, as racist as it is, than to do an honorable thing. So, and that again, this is Christian folks being raised this way.
Wow.
You know? And I said to him, once he said that, I said, yeah, well, welcome to following Jesus. Because when you follow Jesus, you're gonna go against your family. You're gonna lose family members, brothers, sisters, mom, dad, uncle, aunt. There's a risk at losing those closest to you when you go follow Jesus. Bottom line. So this goes back to the point that, this is a learned behavior. Folks, right? Do you know, I got another story to tell. I was at a UMC church a couple weeks ago, and the pastor stood up there and said, he talked about the, I don't know if y'all saw the picture of a fraternity with guns in Mississippi, right at the Emmett Till Memorial.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that memorial gets vandalized quite often by them.
Yes. Yep. So I didn't know that until I saw that story.
Yeah, and he talked about, and the pastor mentioned that story, right? Seeing guns being held at the Emmett Till Memorial, right? And he said after church, this was the 9:00 service. He was sharing it, but he shared after the 8:30 service, right? He shared that a member of his congregation came up to him and told him that his wife, auntie, and his wife's cousin were the ones who killed Emmett Till.
What?
Yes. He said that one of the brothers at the church is related to the ones who killed Emmett Till.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
He made the point to say, this ain't out there in far space nowhere.
Right, exactly.
This is right here in Indiana, which is one of the birthplaces of the KKK, by the way, and the most prominent lynching in one of the most prominent lynchings in our history, which turned out to be on postcards when they lynched the two gentlemen down in Marion, Indiana, by the way. And became a postcard and went what became a postcard and went across the country. So that was his point, that you never know how close you are to this issue. So don't ever act like it's out there somewhere. No. These are members of the church that every Sunday that you are. And being silent. I mean, Dr. King said one day we're not, and I'm paraphrasing that, one day it won't be our enemies that we remember, but it will be the silence of our enemies.
Yes.
And I want to speak to Dr. King when I meet him in eternity one day, because I'm going to tell him, if you silent, you ain't my friend.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dr. King, but if you're silent about these issues, you're not my friend. You know, but yeah, you know, so the question is, where do we go from here? You know, and I'm going to quote this article one more time, Linda, and then we can talk about, because we can't leave without what's next. And I wanted to say this to both of you also before I quote this passage here. I want to say this, that we need folks praying, right? We need the Teresitas to be writing, the politicians, right? We need the Lindas and the Rodneys doing the footwork. You know, because followers of Jesus, you know, everybody can't be William Barber.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Everybody can't be Teresita and can write and to send letters and make calls to the politicians to hold them accountable. You know, because that's the question. What is our moral accountability to all of this, right? And everybody can't be on the ground challenging white folks, challenging campus pastors, challenging local pastors and leaders in their community, right? So we all have our vineyard. A systemic change, because I can care less about somebody giving you a gift to help you pay off your building or something like that. That ain't systemic change. You know, that's you know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I'm thankful for this conversation, and I'm glad that it's been revealed more and more our role in the vineyard are different, right? The quote is this: neither the nation nor the church has demonstrated a sustained commitment to confronting white supremacy. And it's about time both nation and church. And I would even challenge the church,
especially,
to be the forerunner.
Right.
So that we should be leading the nation in this fight against systemic white supremacy.
Right.
Systemic racism. For the church to be, as King said, to be headlights and not tail lights.
Right.
And the moment the church takes on that task in a time where institutionalized religion is suffering so much, and part of it because of that. It's not that we're not relevant because we don't have the rock and roll band and the bearded, pastor.
Right.
That's not the type of relevancy that people are looking for. My hope and my faith is that there are more of us who stand for justice and who stand for love and who stand for our neighbor. And the church is not the place where they have found that, and the opposite is true. But so I think the moment that the church takes on the task of confronting white supremacy and racism, we will find out in numbers that there's more of us out there looking for a way and an outlet to do the work of Christ in the world.
Right. And we can't be, the most common phrase in the Bible is fear not.
Fear not.
Right.
We can't be afraid. Let's find out how dependent you really are on God, because this is going to take some risk, and it's going to take risking losing some people and some profits in your collection every Sunday.
Absolutely.
But if you believe in God and you depend on God so much, then you know that God will take care of it all, regardless of those folks who decide to walk out your church who are millionaires.
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take the risk. Let's find out how truly dependent on God you really are, since you say you believe in God.
Right.
Let's
Absolutely.
find out. At the risk of loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the risk of losing privilege, right? At the risk, I forget the quote. I'm gonna mess this quote up too, but it's something like, those who have been in power so long, equity or equality feels like oppression.
Right.
I'm gonna find that.
Right. I know what you're trying to say.
You know what I'm trying to say?
That's the biggest part of the problem, is that it's not trying to have equality for an oppressed group of people doesn't then mean that those who were in power then become the oppressed.
Exactly.
That's what the problem is.
Right. That's
we
the fear.
be here. We don't. So we're trying to shift from here, and then people think it's going to go from here to here.
Right.
No,
That's
we're not trying to do that. We're trying to go from here to here.
Exactly.
You're still going to be here, but we're going to be right alongside of you.
Exactly.
It's very simple.
Right.
But it feels good to feel affirmed that you're superior, and that is a sin. That is an ill of.
Yes.
It feels good that I feel that I'm superior, and in the complex of superiority, it is a societal illness that we also need to name.
Right.
Right.
And that's the fear. That's the fear. The quote is actually, I don't know who said it, but when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression.
Right.
You said it, Linda. Nobody's trying to really.
You're no longer special.
Right.
Yeah?
And nobody's trying to reverse. And nobody's trying to do a reversal. We're just trying to make some equity here. You know, the fear is, Linda, the fear is that's exactly what they're scared. What they've been doing for so long, it will be reversed. And you know what? I don't know, but to me, people of color just don't act that way.
No,
we're more of a magnanimous people. We almost are too magnanimous and too forgiving. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to reverse that. That just doesn't make sense. To want to do what have to do to you what y'all been doing to us for centuries. It just don't make sense. We don't. I mean, as far as I know, we don't.
Right.
I mean, some people might want to, but as a whole.
I mean, of course, there's always, some extremists.
So I like that. At the risk of blank, whatever.
At
blank
the risk. At the risk.
Fear.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
All right.
Mouthful today.
We did. It was a great conversation. This was great. So I think this is a good point to end the conversation here. And we'll see what our next conversation will be. Because if you remember from our last recording, this wasn't even supposed to be our next conversation. It was supposed to be follow-up from our previous recording.
Correct.
But when things happen in society, it is very important for you to address them at that time.
Correct.
Because the way things shift, you never know what is going to be the next thing to happen. So it's very important that we raise our voices at the time when it will always be relevant, but when it's in the forefront of everyone's mind, that's when it's very important.
And if I could say something, I'm just thankful that Linda, you have been pushing us and not giving up on us, and I'm thankful to God for us having the opportunity to add our voices to the conversation.
Yes.
Our voices would be mute, or we'd be listening to other people to try to find our voices, right?
Right.
avenue where we get to use and to put our voices to the conversation. And, you know, I'm sure that there's people out there who's on board with us. You know,
Yes.
wish, and maybe we can do this the next conversation, but I just wish we had been able to show some kind of tribute to Toni Morrison, or the late great Toni Morrison.
Oh, yeah.
So I got an article that we can kind of read again, and maybe we can discuss that in a little bit more detail the next conversation.
Sounds good.
We definitely got to show some type of tribute to the great
Yes.
Morrison.
Yes, I agree.
I think she deserves
Sounds good.
a whole episode, so.
Say
Yep.
again, Teresita?
She deserves a whole episode, so.
Yeah, right. Exactly. To herself, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a
Yep.
good idea.
Yeah. So.
All right. So until next time, I guess we'll be saying goodbye to everyone.
Peace and love.
Good night.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. All right. Bye, everybody.
Well, hold on, Linda. I got a question for you.
Wait,
You
I'm
stopped
still
the
recording.
right? Okay.
You want me to stop recording?
Yes.
Okay, hold on.